This is your Unit 1A Review Day 3 video. This is the last video before your test. If you do not feel prepared for your test, you can always go back and watch the review videos, or really any video. If there's a specific content that you're finding challenging, just reach out to me and we can set up a time to work together, or I can direct you to a video that would help you from this unit. Okay, so in this video, what we're going to do on this first page is we need to match the property with the equation. I look right here, I have all of these properties. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just put a little bit of a reminder underneath of what these properties are, a little clue, and then I want you to pause the video and try to match them up. So when we have the commutative property of addition, you move them around, or pretty much, the order changes. So it could 5 plus 6 is equal to 6 plus 5. For the commutative property of multiplication, the order changes. It's just multiplication. So this one you can see right here is addition, and this one's multiplication. But both of them, the same thing is happening. The order of the numbers is changing. Next, we have the associative property of addition. And with the associative property, the way the numbers are grouped changes. So the groups change. So the groups change in the associative property for addition and the associative property for multiplication. The grouping also change. And when I say the groups change, it's the exact same numbers on both sides, just which numbers are in the parentheses is what changes. Next, we have the additive identity. And the additive identity, it is a number plus 0 equals itself. So, a number plus 0 equals that same number. You can think of it as it's keeping its identity. And it's additive, so we know that has to do with addition. Next, we have the additive inverse. Well, inverse means opposite. So that's when you add opposites. So for example, 10 and negative 10 would be opposites. So the additive inverse is when you add opposites. Next, we have the multiplicative identity. The multiplicative identity is similar to the additive because the answer is the same as one of the numbers. So when you take a number and you multiply it by 1, you get that same number. It keeps its identity. And last, we have the multiplicative inverse. And that's when you multiply a number by its reciprocal. So for example, we have a number and we're going to multiply it by its reciprocal. So 1 over that number. And then we get an answer of 1. So 8 times 1/8 would equal 1. That is the multiplicative inverse, and you can kind of think it as you're flipping the fraction, so it's kind of like the opposite. All right, so what you're going to do now is, given these clues that I gave you, you are going to select which letter goes which equation. So for example, we have the additive identity. We know that that's a number plus 0 is equal to that number. So if I go right here, I'm like, oh, I have 6 plus 0 equals 6. That's the additive identity. So I'm going to go ahead and put an E there because that's the number E. As I'm putting in my answers, I would suggest you guys cross it off so that you know which ones you've already done. So go ahead, pause the video, and try on your own. Okay, hopefully you were able to try these on your own, and let's go through it. So for this one, we have 5 times 1 is equal to 5. When we have a number times 1 and it keeps its identity, It is the multiplicative identity. So the answer here is G. It's a weird looking G. There we go. All right, looking at the next one, we have the group or the quantity 2 times 5 times 7 is equal to 2 times 5 times 7. So when I look here, I can see it's multiplication, so I know it's one of my multiplication properties, and then I can see that the numbers are grouped differently. So which one of these has to do with grouping number? Oop, associative. It's the group you go with, who you associate with. That's a good way to remember it. So it's multiplication and the groups have changed, so that's the associative property of multiplication. Right, next we look here and we see it's addition, so we know it's one of the addition properties, and it's the same numbers on both sides, and the order's changed. We have 11 plus 6 equals 6 plus 11. So the only thing that happened is the numbers moved around. When the order changes, that is the commutative property. So we know the answer here would be A. Next, we have addition, and we have the same numbers on both sides. The only thing that changed was what numbers were in the parentheses. So the groups changed. We know that group has to do with associative, or what you associate with. The groups change. So number 4 would be C, because the way the numbers were grouped changed. That's the associative property. Next, we go to number 6. We have 7 plus negative 7 is equal to 0. So here we can see that we are adding, and we're adding to numbers that are opposite. The additive inverse is when you add opposites. So the answer for this would be F, because we're adding opposites. And when we add opposite numbers, we always get 0. It's called a zero pair. All right, next we have 6 times 1 6 is equal to 1. Well, we know it's multiplication, and we're multiplying the number by its reciprocal so that we get an answer of 1. When we take a number and we multiply it by the reciprocal, we get an answer of 1. It is a multiplicative inverse. The answer here would be H. And last but not least, we have 7 times 2 equals 2 times 7. It's multiplication, and the order of the numbers changed. They moved around. So that when the order changes, it's commutative, and it's multiplication, so it's a commutative property of multiplication. Okay, if you got any of these incorrect, please fix your mistakes before you move on to the next page. On this page, we are going to practice using the distributive property. And remember, the distributive property is when we multiply a number from the outside of the parentheses by both numbers inside the parentheses. So for this problem, 2 is on the outside, so we have to multiply it by 5 and by 1. So we have 2 times 5 plus 2 times 1. So the number that's missing here is 5. So we do 2 times 5, 2 times 1. What are we missing? 5. So we go ahead and put a 5 here. Okay? Now down here, you're going to do the whole thing on your own. And oh look, these are the same problem. We have 2 times the quantity, 5 plus 1. Using the distributive property, I know that I multiply the number on the outside by both terms on the inside. So we have 2 times 5, which is 10, plus, that stays the same, 2 times 1, which is 2, and then we add those numbers together. 10 plus 2 is equal to 12. So what I want you to do right now is I'd like you to pause the video and try these on your own. Okay, hopefully you tried these on your own, and let's go through them. So number 10 right here, we take 4 and we multiply it by both terms. So it's 4 times 2 plus 4 times 6. So our missing number here is 4. Let's go to this next one. We are taking the number on the outside and we multiply it by both numbers on the inside. So we have 4 times 2, and that's equal to 8. And then we have 4 times 6, and that's equal to 24. If we add those together, 8 plus 24, we get an answer of 32. Next one, we have 5 times 4 is 20, minus, so that stays there because it's a subtraction symbol there, 5 times 2, which is 10. 20 minus 10 is 10. Last but not least, we have number 14 for 14. Take the outside number, which is 3, times the first number or term. 3 times 3 is 9. And 3 times 5 is 15. We keep our subtraction symbol there. And now we have 9 minus 15, and 9 minus 15 is negative 6. Because remember, when we subtract, we add the opposite. Okay, hopefully you got these correct. You guys should always be using your calculator to check your work. So if you accidentally put positive 6 here, if you would have typed this in your calculator, 9 minus 15, you would have gotten negative 6. So make sure you're checking your work. All right, get all this down before you move on. All right, on this page, you are going to circle which property that this represents. I reviewed the properties on the first page of the notes, so I'm not going to do that again. What I would like you to do is try these on your own. So you're going to pause the video and you're going to answer all of these questions on this page on your own. And then you're going to come back after you've tried on your own and see if you did it accurately. So right now, pause the video. All right, let's go through it. 15, here we go. 5 plus 6 is equal to 6 plus 5. The order of the numbers changed, so that is the commutative property. 16, rewrite 9 times the quantity 2 plus 3, or the group 2 plus 3, using the distributive property. We know the distributive property. You multiply the outside by the inside. So 9 times 2 is 18, and 9 times 3 is 27. So the answer would be C. Which of the following is an example of the associative property of multiplication? Well, associative property is when the groups change and it's multiplication. So the answer is A, because the groups changed and it's multiplication. There's different numbers in the parentheses. Number 18, which property is used in the following? 8 times 2 plus 4, or 8 times the quantity 2 plus 4. And here we have equals 8 times 2 plus 8 plus 4. So this is showing 8 being multiplied by both terms on the inside of the parentheses. And that is the distributive property, because you can think of it as the number 8 is being distributed to both terms. 19, which expression shows the identity property of multiplication? So this is when a number is keeping its identity. It's staying the same, and we have multiplication. So if we look here, we have 4 times 1 is equal to 4. We're taking a number, we're multiplying it by 1, and it's keeping that identity, or the answer is 4. So A represents the identity property of multiplication. Next, we have which expression shows the inverse property of multiplication. Well, inverse property is when we take a number and we multiply it by the reciprocal or the flipped fraction, and it equals 1. We look here, we have 4 times 1/4 is equal to 1. So the answer is C. Okay, hopefully you got these correct. It's interesting, they all ended up being A and C. Let's go to that last page. Okay, again on this page, you are going to answer these questions on your own and then come back and check your work. So you need to pause the video and try them out right now. All right, let's see how this last page went. Here we are multiplying and the numbers in the parentheses change, the groups change. So that is D, associative property of multiplication. Number 22, we have a number plus its inverse equals 0, so inverse property of addition. Next, identity property of addition is when we have a number plus 0, and that equals itself. The number keeps its identity when it's being added to 0, or 0 is being added. Next, we have all addition, and we can see the numbers in the parentheses change, so the groups change. So it's the associative property of addition. And last, we have which one's a distributive property? Well, for C, we have 3 times 7 is 21, and 3 times 9 is 27. So the answer would be C. All right, this was your last video. I hope that it went well, and that when you go and do your independent practice now on Class Kick, that goes well also.